And we're live on a Thursday night, little Torah hangout study gig. John Gishla is with me, and we are beginning Exodus this week, and also taking Q&A from our Christian brothers and sisters out there in the audience. Recently saw a conversation where people were getting very upset that Dennis Prager is a great guy. He does PragerU. If you're not familiar with PragerU, just go on YouTube and search PragerU, and you will understand why this guy's so great. He recently put out a video saying, just say Merry Christmas, because in America, it's a national holiday, and we shouldn't have to sterilize the population's celebration or our national holiday by avoiding Merry Christmas. And a lot of folks got upset and says, well, he obviously didn't read when so-and-so said this, and he hasn't read his Talmud, and he doesn't know, and he can't say Merry Christmas. Why? That just might mean he's an idolater and will send us all back into Egypt and we'll be slaves again. I kind of have a tendency to side with Mr. Prager on this one here, particularly on Christmas. I've gotten a soft heart. I don't think that the Christians are all that much different in comparison to a lot of other people. And I don't see the need to reject the Christian to be a good Ger or Jew for that matter. I don't see the need to, anymore. I don't like it. I'll tell you that. I'm still not a Christmas fan. It's the first year I haven't had a case of the humbugs. But they're not offering your poodles up to Zorkon the space god or something. They're not out there. It's not like they're too far removed from the biblical narrative. Not too far. I know everybody's different, and we have Jews in Hollywood too. There are Jews who are lawyers, so you can't really nail a Christian when a Jew is a lawyer in this country. Okay? Nobody. I don't care how orthodox you are. If you're a lawyer, you have no business talking morality on any other Jew or Christian. Not in my country. So, because I'm kind of a schmuck on this, yeah, we're gonna let the Christians come in and chat and talk. We'll see if anybody comes. Maybe they will, maybe they won't. We're a little late today because of technical stuff and my slow computer. So I'm gonna go get my Chumashim out. We'll see if anybody wants to come in. I've sent some links out. John's getting links too. We'll see if this thing's even going to go anywhere, because I'm doubting it will. We'll see. We'll try and have some fun. Rosalie, how you doing today? How you holding up? Well, all right.
Well, I guess Rosalie is incapacitated. Is she there?
I guess. How's Portugal? You say it's a little cold, but I noticed there's some greenery around there. It can't be too cold.
No, it's not. It's a little breezy, but it's beautiful. It's beautiful landscape, beautiful scenery, beautiful weather, beautiful people. I mean, it's just a lovely, wonderful place to live and to be, and it's not a mistake at all. I mean, this is there's no other place I would rather be than here. To be honest with you, it's the complete 180 of New York. It's the complete, much different than, to be honest with you, America. Yeah, I love it, and it's great.
Yay.
Excellent.
Plus, I have a beautiful wife.
Yeah, they help. Is she there right now? She's not there right now. Tell her I say hi.
I wanted her to be here today, but she ended up getting called in for work. So when work calls, you have to answer. Unfortunately, believe it or not, I'm adding Eric Holvine to the room. Who knows if he answers, but I am adding a lot of Christians to the room, as many as I can possibly find. This is Christmas special. Merry Christmas, happy holidays, happy Hanukkah, happy whatever. Whatever you particular, Kwanzaa, I guess, or Feliz Navidad. Huh?
Happy New Year.
Happy New Year. Yeah. So James, Parsha in a nutshell. What do you got for us? What's happening in Shemot? We're in Parsha Shemot, a new book. Open up this Exodus.
It's a jump cut, isn't it? We get from
this week. Yeah, it's pretty good, right?
It's a jump cut. We go 400 years into the future, just about.
No, 400.
How many years was Israel exiled in?
200 years. It goes 200 years.
Oh, still that's a kind of a jump cut. I think one of the most notable things is the language in which it says a Pharaoh arose who did not know Jacob, did not know Joseph. So what that implies, and I'll get my stone out here and see if I can find a commentary that says it better than me, but from what that implies to us is that a Pharaoh arose that did not know. So there was obviously some sort of regime change that went down in Egypt, because this is not the Pharaoh of old. This is not Potiphar's master that we knew of when Jacob was around. That alone, knowing there's a ruler that rose up that didn't know Joseph, and that pretty much explains why things had to go what they do and why they're the direction they're going. Let me get a commentary here on Shemos. The book of Exodus begins. This is from the Stone Edition Chumash commentary on the first verse. And these are the names. The book of Exodus begins with a conjunction and in order to relate it to the concluding chapters of Genesis. There, Jacob's family begins the process of exile by descending into Egypt, and the narrative of the exile is developed until the ends of the blaze of the miracles that culminated in the Exodus and the giving of the Torah at Sinai. Thus, the opening phrases of our introduction, introduces the exile. This one picks up the thread of the narrative and continues it. Saforno also notes that the passage in Genesis listed the names of those who came into Egypt, including Jacob's grandchildren, whereas our passage lists only his sons. In the context of resisting the cooperative atmosphere of Egypt and preserving the moral and spiritual grandeur of Jacob's family, his sons were equal to the task. Because they kept the nation on the high level set for it by Jacob, the slavery did not begin as long as they were alive. His grandchildren, however, were not able to maintain the spiritual grandeur of their forebears, so they were not honored by being named here. Nevertheless, my boss is calling. Nevertheless, their marriage was great enough to prevent the onset of the enslavement as long as they were alive. And guys, I'm going to have to put you on hold. He wouldn't call if it wasn't important. I'll be right back.
So I'll take over for a little bit. This is the Christian Hangout special, the Orphans of Abraham, every Thursday night at 8 o'clock Eastern. I'm sort of doing my own thing here. So James is taking over the ship. He's manning the boat. So whatever he wants to do, I guess we're on his channel. We had a little bit of a shit show on my side of things. We did open up before 8 o'clock, but we had a bunch of little slimy balls come in the room. I hate to say that, but and they caused a lot of trouble and a lot of nonsense. And someone sent the links out to a bunch of people they shouldn't link, and then just nonsense. Had a good Christian little group going, but I guess now they're not coming in. I wanted it to be a Christian debate discussion, but I guess that's not going to be the case. I am in Portugal. I am loving life. I actually wanted to say that things are better than they could ever dream of being. I said in last week's Parsha, to recap, because we're heading to Shemot, Genesis, it ends by saying that these are the years of Jacob's the living of his. These were the years of his living. I don't remember exactly how it's worded, but it's worded in such a way as it uses the word life twice. Like he lived the living years. These are his life of his living years, or something to that effect. And like, so the question is, why would the Torah imply such a thing? And the reason why is Jacob had one of the most miserable lives that a person could ever have. All he ever knew in his life was sadness. Actually, quite honest and frank, he actually says, quote in the parsha, I think a couple of parshas beforehand, he says he never knew what it was to be happy. That's actually what it says in the Torah. Jacob says that he never knew happiness. He never knew what it was like to be happy. He had a wife that died tragically. He had a son. His son was sold as a slave to a bunch of Palestinians, and it was sold to the Bedouins, and sold to Arabs, sold to the Egyptians. Then he was a slave. Jacob himself was a slave for 7 years, and he was duped, tricked by his warlock stepfather, who was evil. And then he had to do another 7 years with the real woman he really wanted. He had a brother that hated him and wanted him dead. You know, just one thing after another. Um, yeah, it wasn't such a wonderful existence. The Parsha concludes, these are the living years of his life, or however, these are the lives that he lived in, living 17 years. And so the last final 17 years, meaning that this was his happiness. This is what it meant. He finally accumulated whatever I don't know, however you want to put it, not accumulated like it points or something like, but God kind of gave him a little respite, gave him a little serenity, a little serenity, whatever the word you want to use. And this is it. This is his life, and this is his real life, not just his life. Because yeah, when he was living, running from his brother, running from Laban, running on the run, going here, going there, Egypt, going down. You know, he's always on the run. He's always losing someone. He's always, lost and on the run. You know, constantly. And he finally settled. It actually says he settled in Goshen, and the land was blessed because of him. And he finally, this last 17 years, he was actually able to appreciate life and feel life and live life. So a little bit of a partial study of last week, but now we come into Exodus. Hopefully James comes back because I'm just rambling at this point. Now with Exodus, now we sort of have the buildup of, why did this have to happen? So it says, Moses rebukes God. How could you claim to be a god and you do such atrocities? Why is such a thing even happens? How could God's a deity? He can do whatever he wants, right? He can whatever, right? Heal all the people with cancer, whatever. So, God answers Moses by saying the accumulation of all these things that took place was that you would be redeemed one day. So it sort of ties into Jacob. Go ahead, James. Take it away. Welcome back.
Yeah, I'm here. I got called in early to work in the morning. I got to go in really early. I had to take that call. Not exactly on call, but when the call comes, I got to take it.
Well, if we have to end the study early, that's fine.
It's tomorrow morning. This is in the early morning tomorrow. I'm good.
Excellent. Okay, good. Baruch Hashem.
Let's see. Hey, look what I can do. Share controls. Amazing. Mod powers have returned. Everybody gets an upgrade. And we have no viewers and nobody coming in. Oh, baby.
Yeah, that's. I don't know why. I added like 800 people. I mean, I don't know if you see the backlog, but I added a whole bunch of folks.
Don't invite limeys.
Yeah,
sorry guys, but you guys are rude and mean, and you got a bad fucking attitude. If I lived in shithole country, I'd have a bad attitude too. Your prime minister wants pedophiles to be legally able to adopt. Yeah, what? The UK. May the sun never set on that shithole. The sun's down, baby. Down. We're next, but Yes, I don't need any more limeys coming here and showing dick pics and making fun of people and spreading their atheist, humanist nonsense. Sorry, but when a whole bunch of limeys came in and they're turned out being a bunch of drama, and this guy's known for getting pornography on, I mean, I don't need that kind of stuff. You can buy anybody except Buzz. Buzz is one nice limey I put up with. If you get Pat Condell in here, I'll tolerate him too. This is not the night for me to be on, Mike. I want to shut up now. Y'all have fun.
James, would you be able to read Pasha in a nutshell from Chabad.org? Because that's usually a good summary of what we're dealing with for the week of the Pasha. Although we set this hang it up as a Christian debate discussion, that I guess that will happen if Christians decide to show. But I got a couple of more Christians I just found on my list. I'm going to go ahead and add them. Hopefully we do get that in. I'm in a little bit of a mood of a debate. I mean, I'm willing to discuss Christianity or however you want to put it. Rebuke it, discuss it, debate it. It is Christmas. Today is the birth of Christ. Christmas, right? So, whatever, yeah. And Merry Christmas.
All right. Shmos in a nutshell. This takes a long time, so give me a second.
The
children of Israel. I'm sorry, what's that?
No, go ahead.
The children of Israel multiply in Egypt. Threatened by their growing numbers, Pharaoh enslaves them and orders the Hebrew midwives, Sifra and Puah, to kill all male babies at birth. When they do not comply, he commands his people to cast the Hebrew babies into the Nile. A child is born to Yocheved, the daughter of Levi, and her husband Amram, and are placed in a basket on the river, while the baby's sister Miriam stands watch from afar. Pharaoh's daughter discovers the boy, raises him as her son, and names him Moshe. As a young man, Moses leaves the house and discovers the hardship of his brethren. He sees the Egyptian beating a Hebrew and kills the Egyptian. The next day, he sees two Jews fighting. When he admonishes them, they reveal his deed of the previous day, and Moses is forced to flee to Midian. There, he rescues Jethro's daughters, marries one of them, Zipporah, and becomes a shepherd of his father-in-law's flocks. God appears to Moses at a burning bush and at the foot of Mount Sinai and instructs him to go to Pharaoh and demand, "Let my people go so that they may serve me." Moses' brother Aaron is appointed to serve as his spokesman. In Egypt, Moses and Aaron assemble the elders of Israel until the time of their redemption has come. The people believe Pharaoh refuses to let them go and even intensifies the suffering of Israel. Moses returns to protest. "Why have you done evil to this people?" God promises that the redemption is close at hand.
It's a jam-packed Pasha. I say that every week. It seems like I'm a broken record, but man, I mean, we did have a few. I did put a Facebook poll out, and I did ask some questions. You know, what topics you want to do, Christian special, what it means to be a shepherd. And this week, you know, Moses was a shepherd. Why does God allow evil? And you know, there's a few different topics. Welcome, Wade. What's going on? How's your week?
How's it going, guys?
Yeah, maybe the Christians that were in the room, they got a little bad taste in their mouth with all the lime juice that was flowing. Let's see. I don't know. Damn.
Jethro, high priest of Midian.
Yeah, Jethro, our favorite Jethro. He's a pretty cool cat. Yeah, he had a flock.
The text seems. Hang on, let me get this thing. the text would appear to tell us that Jethro, high priest of Midian, knew of God prior to Moses' arrival. Now, we've heard that he was an idolater. He was like a honeybee, went to different religions and took the best. Some say that he cataloged religions for the sake of knowing the difference between what God wants and what the world says. But one way or another, I mean, that was the mountain of God before Moses walked up there. I find that very interesting that they would call that the mountain of God, Horeb, which would be Sinai later, call it the mountain of God if they didn't believe in God, if God wasn't known. So we're kind of getting that whole education from Shem and from Shem's children, not just just Avraham, but we're getting there's been something, there's some knowledge apparently that's been passed down and kept while Israel had been in Egypt this whole time. Because pretty much they left their homeland to the bottom feeders when the famine broke out. And what became of the land after they left were not the best bunch that lived there in the land. But Midian, I know we're supposed to think of them as idolaters and they were ignorant and they had no idea, and it was only Moses, and I really doubt that. Jethro doesn't show up at Sinai later and say, wow, I just heard about this God guy. He says, no, now I know the God of Israel is the only true God. So the fact that it was Horeb, the fact that it was designated as a mountain of God prior to the Exodus, and prior to the transmission of Torah there, I think this speaks loudly of the kind of people that Moses found himself to be a part of. He married their daughter, a non-Israelite. We're supposed to, there's a lot to this here. I think that and as far as the text is concerned, it would seem to be merely an implication, but when you look deeper, I don't see how else it could be the mountain of God, and how anybody would have known that was the mountain of God without some knowledge of God preceding Moses' arrival.
I think that's a great little vart you gave there. Like knowing God. Like, how can someone have a monopoly on knowing God? Or a group of people, or you know what I'm saying, or an individual group of people in Asia, to know, you know what I mean? It's like the audacity to say such a thing. And that's what this shows. This live show. It's open to the Christians, and come and tell us about your God. And I'm going to say to quote Pharaoh, "Who is your God? I do not know your God." So, but even that may be the case. I don't know the Christian God. I'm willing to listen and willing to share, like Jethro, the honeybee, as James says. So if you got good information, I'm going to accept it. Like King Solomon said, to quote King Solomon in the book of Ecclesiastes, everything was my teacher, for I learned from everything in life. So, Wade, what's going on? How you doing, brother?
Doing good, man. I saw a thing on Facebook. It said, if your God ever wore diapers, you might want to change gods.
Ouch. Ouch. Yeah. Change God. Change the diaper.
Gotta love James Bush.
Yeah.
Love the man.
It was pretty funny. I thought it was pretty good. So, yeah.
It's like they say that if the Pope poops in the woods, does anyone hear it? If God takes his shit in a diaper, does anyone change it? I guess you can say.
I do find it hilarious. I look back on it, and I used to really, really believe that, and now I look at it and go, why? Why? I just don't understand. I really don't.
You used to believe what was it exactly you used to believe, Wade?
Christianity, the whole bit.
Ah,
I guess most of us here, if not all, did the same. And you just, I guess you look back at it and you just shake your head. It's like, how in the world? But, you know,
in many ways, they got the ethics down. Sadly, what followed them was eternal damnation, being born into sin, and being unworthy of your Creator, who says, "Come to me."
yeah,
They don't murder. There's no stealing. There's no adultery. There are many pluses to the Christian folk. And hey, Rabbi, hey, Armin.
Hey.
It's just that what follows it, there's a lot of baggage that goes
yeah.
along.
The bad thing is that, they say they're born into sin. So they say, well, that's not my fault. And, they're already judged before they even come out of the womb. So they're already got a mindset that, it's not my fault now when I was born, and it wasn't my fault when I die. So that's why we had to have the J-Man.
It's just it's a strangeness. I don't think there's a really, as much as I'm disparaging anything disparaging really between the two faiths. I'm also, like I said, I mentioned earlier, I don't know if we were live, Dennis Prager has gotten chastised in a group because he said he released a video this year saying, just say Merry Christmas. If you're an American, it's an American holiday. Just say it. You're not excluded. You're not included. It's not the end of the world. You're not saying go worship pagan gods and offer your poodle to Zorkon, the space god. That's not what Christianity is. That's not what the season's about.
I put it this way. I mean, if you want to say it, say it. If you don't want to say it, you know what? I try not to say it because I don't celebrate it.
Right.
It's to each their own. I don't care. Somebody wishes me Merry Christmas, I go Happy New Year. Whatever. So it really, whatever. They don't really matter. People really don't care.
I mean, you're a Christian lady. Do you feel there's a war on Christmas right now?
No. I think the war on Christmas is actually coming from Christians, from the standpoint of we are losing Christians in droves because of the shenanigans that we've been doing for the past, I don't know, at least decade, but potentially more than that. I think we've been too conservative with our faith, too literal with it. I think there's a youth movement that doesn't have an issue saying happy holidays, but knowing that Merry Christmas, especially as we celebrate it, has very little to do with Christ. So any war on Christmas is really, from my perspective, driven from what is Christmas really about? Because what we're doing right now is more pagan than it is Christ-like.
Mm-hmm. I think I would disagree with that. In terms of a youth movement leading the way towards anything, I mean, that youth movement is typically not a religious one, right? I mean, youth in terms of secular, for sure, they have no problem tossing out Jesus from Christmas when it's part of the tradition, not necessarily part of the religion. But I see a huge attack on Christianity in America. And not just in America, in the world in general, like even in Israel. Like in Israel, like most people don't know that they've changed the plus sign. That when Jewish kids do math, they're not allowed to have a plus sign in their book. So they have a plus with a little hook on it because of the cross.
You've got to be kidding me. They want to nullify simple.
That's right.
Okay, and I'm not talking about what I feel. I'm just talking about data and research that's come out. What you have, especially just recently, we have a Southern Baptist Convention. They just realized this last year that they had gone too fundamental, and that had drawn people away, especially youth, from their beliefs. They've lost about 800,000 believers, primarily youth, in the past decade. And you see that happening within the AME and other kind of large groups as well. And they've said we've got to come more to the
I
left.
don't think they've said that. There is no way that the Southern Baptist Convention said that we have. No,
he never let me finish. I can give you the link for the article. And he's just talking out of what he wants to think, except out of data. They just put in they're saying now women should be in leadership. They've had more minorities, and they're putting them through the leadership ranks. Yes, there is a huge wave of change that is more left going on with the Christian church right now. It's that simple.
I just want to say to the Baptists, welcome to the 1980s. Go ahead.
There's no such, study put out by anyone credible saying that evangelical Christians are considering moving more left and putting minorities, like if
you're an idiot.
All right. For someone to believe that, they would have to acknowledge.
Let him finish now. Go ahead.
Like, for someone to believe that, they would have to acknowledge that evangelicals are in some way oppressing minorities and keeping them from key position, or oppressing female clergy. Like, when evangelicals have had female clergies for at least the last 30 years, right? There's no one being oppressed in the Southern Baptist Church, after the Civil War. So there's no way that an evangelical Christian is going to say whether they're going to substitute what the Bible requires of them, i.e. conservative values, for more left-wing values, just to gain more followers. That's not something that an evangelical Christian would even think.
From Trump. You're just talking out of your mind right now. You just don't know. You didn't go to the last Southern Leadership Conference. God.
So
listen,
I
wasn't ordained.
You know what? I am not.
Hold on. All right.
Good night.
All right, fine. This is ridiculous.
Oh, she was out.
If people don't know, I am an ordained Baptist minister. I went to Jacksonville Baptist Theological Seminary, and I was a Southern Baptist when Charles Stanley was the head of the Southern Baptist Convention. There's no such thing as an evangelical movement considering dropping traditional conservative values to align themselves more with the left to gain more youth. Now, that does occur in mainline churches like Lutheran, Methodist, Presbyterian, but not in the Southern Baptist Convention or Assemblies of God. It doesn't. It's antithetical, like, for them to say that when things get rough, that we're going to change our doctrinal beliefs. It doesn't. It's just, she's on the left and constantly ridicules everything on the right, which is why it's easier for her to say that those in the Southern Baptist Convention were oppressing minorities and are deciding to allow minorities higher positions of power.
Well, she's right that the kids are leaving the church and they have to do something. Like the Boy Scouts tried to do that whole thing, and look what happened to them.
They're not leaving because they're too much on the right. In other words, like, they're leaving because America as a whole is becoming less religious. But that doesn't mean that you take your religion and apply it and stop saying Merry Christmas, apply it more to the left and less conservative. To be conservative means to be religious. It's the religious right is deemed that for a reason, because being on the right typically means that you have more common sense than people on the left. The left typically doesn't elevate religion. Look at Europe. Outside of Poland, people don't go to churches. All these churches are being bought up by nightclubs, and they're in New York also. Like, you have a bunch of churches that become nightclubs. It's not a recipe for anything good moving towards the left.
Let me ask you a question, Asher, if I may. Did you see a video by Dennis Prager called "Just Say Merry Christmas"?
No, but I listen to Dennis Prager every day.
Okay.
And I know that he has no problem saying it. I have no problem saying it either.
Right. I was going to ask you what you thought about that, because I saw in a room I was in, and people were giving him flack. Not personally, he wasn't there, because he this, and he's not reading the Talmud, and he's not adhering to his faith, and what does he know about? How can he call himself Jewish? Yada yada. To dare say Merry Christmas and to actually promote it like that. And I'm on Dennis's side on this. I just found out he was Jewish a couple of months ago, to be honest with you. And I've liked him for a while.
He grew up Orthodox, and he went to yeshiva his whole life. Now he's a little more traditional and less Orthodox, but I mean, the Talmud has nothing to say about Christianity, right? So in terms of what does rabbinic Judaism have to say on the topic,
see,
we're gonna have
what do
to.
you think? Do you think about Mary? What do you think of what, you know,
Oh
just
no,
say
I
Mary?
have no problem. Like a Christian has no problem saying Lashana Tova to a Jew and responding. You know, like, why should we have a problem saying to have a Merry Christmas? You're not saying worship Jesus on this day, right? I mean, Christmas is the holiday of the country that we happen to be in exile in, right? Like one statement in the prophets, it's to pray for our leaders and a good, like, well for our country, right? So you're not in any way elevating Christianity, saying Merry Christmas, right, or replying Merry Christmas. This whole thing, like, I'm Jewish. Okay, fine. You know, like you're saying, have a Merry Christmas. You know, like whether, you know, like have a happy Kwanzaa. That's to mean that you celebrate that belief system.
Yeah, I agree with that, but I also say that you're also in a way you're encouraging it. You know, you're worshiping Christianity, supposedly supposed to be about the celebration of Jesus' birth.
Right.
And to me, now this is just to me, I think if you tell another man, Jew, Gentile, whatever, Merry Christmas, that in a way you're encouraging the celebration of a pagan god. Just my opinion. You know?
Sure.
We can't stop it, though. That's what I've had to come to.
No. I mean, I'd rather see that than some Islam, you know, thing. You know, it's still America, so, you know.
Well, like, being that the Jews aren't giving non-Jewish Americans an alternative to Christianity, you know, even more that we should say, like, Merry Christmas. I mean, if Judaism is in some way offering Judaism, and then, you know, like, Christians don't want to leave, okay, like, perhaps we shouldn't want to encourage Christianity. But being that we don't offer them anything, we should at least be glad that they're Christian and not radical Muslims or atheists, right? I've always taught that it's better that a secular Jew, if he's not going to become a religious Jew, that he should become a Christian, would then remain an atheist, right? I mean, better a religious anything than an atheist.
Some moral center. You can gripe at Mormons all day about what you might call goofy beliefs, but when you look at the Mormon family structure and how they handle themselves in public in their community and the charity they do, you know.
For sure. No, I'm glad to live in a Christian country. I mean, this country is a lot more ethical than the state of Israel is. The average American gives a lot more charity than the average Israeli. And the reason I'm mentioning Israel, because that happens to be a state that claims to be Jewish, right? You know, so it seems that Christians overall outdo Jews on Torah ethics. I'm not saying ceremonial things like keeping Shabbat or wearing tefillin, but in terms of taking care of the poor and fighting evil, hey, I mean, we're head and shoulders above any other religion. And we as Americans, I mean, I don't consider myself a Christian, but I mean, I do consider America a country that was founded on Christian values. And that's what made it great. And I think that King David and King Solomon probably resemble an evangelical Christian nowadays more than they would resemble an Orthodox Jew. Just in their behavior. I mean, just read the Psalms. I mean, it sounds, I mean, like King David is you know, full praise and worship. That's not what you hear in Jewish music, you know.
One of the things I wanted to discuss was, and it's going to sound really, really bad. It's not how do we deal with Christians, but they you know, here in the States we've been free. I mean, the Jews been free, the Muslims free, the Christians free, and when we're free people, we're better. I want to say, you know, how should we? Because I'm not really fond of. Look, it took a shed ton of Christians dying to stop the Holocaust at the time they stopped it. That's a lot of Christian blood from a lot of people who were just, you know, rounded up, and some of them volunteered, you know, like we did, you know. a lot of Christians did that, you know, and while the government didn't let them in the first time when they needed it, they've been pretty good since. And even before then, even in the South, you know, Gav was saying the South was actually very good to Jews. Even though the Jews didn't exactly fit into the mold there, they were, you know, the Jews prospered here. They, you know, we've done pretty good for ourselves. I also want to bring up that when the country was founded, Christmas trees were illegal in 12 of the 13 colonies. And they stayed that way even after the revolution for a while, didn't they?
Absolutely.
So they, you know, I think part of the success of the United States of America is because it left some of that pagan claptrap behind and embraced what you might call the old ways, if you're a Christian, or the Old Testament, or the, you know, the whole Thanksgiving was set up a certain amount of time after Sukkot. You know what I'm saying? You know, they read their Bible, they were educated in it, they survived by it. That's what, you know. So I think there is something in Christianity worth getting rid of. But we need to find, I think, a way to connect to our neighbors, to good people, to good God-fearing people. We got, because I think personally I didn't handle it well. I did not handle it well for a long time. And I think it hurt some relations with friends and family, and now family, and, you know.
It wasn't your fault. I mean, your teachers, I mean, with these individuals who lead Noahide movements or counter-missionary organizations, they identify or they solidify with their Judaism on the fact that they're not Christian. You know, so everything is based, you know, every class starts and ends with a bash on the New Testament or a bash in Jesus, and they just start you know, acting very childish instead of saying, like, you know what, we owe a lot to Christians and Christianity, and that we should care about them enough to share the good news with them, which is Torah, right? You know, but this whole thing that we're going to bash them day and night, but not offer them an alternative to Christianity, which, I mean, the Noahide movement is not an alternative to a full religion like Christianity, no, right? You know, it's a good
start. It's a great start. It's a great page one. Everybody should keep 7 mitzvot.
Yeah, I mean, Christians already do that. I mean, it's a debate if, like, you know, believing in Jesus is a violation of the first one. I mean, like, I don't think it is. But by the simple fact that Jews kept a Babylonian calendar and have no problem calling the month of Tammuz, right? You know, Tammuz was a pagan god. But they knew, you know, that it was the country that they were in exile in. And they carried it over even, you know, to like when they were reestablished, like back into the lands, where they kept the Babylonian calendar with the pagan names, right? You know, so in other words, like, you could say, you know, like, Merry Christmas, all right. You know, I wouldn't say that Jesus in himself is a pagan god, right? I mean, this is someone who claims to be, in its most foreign form, an extension or a bodily representation of the God of Israel. I mean, it's not Moloch and it's not Semiramis or you know, so it's not the same thing. And even the rabbis acknowledge that Christianity is a different form of paganism. It's not the traditional form. Paganism was pretty much identified. Huh?
Biblical idolatry pretty much is gone from the earth, isn't it? I mean,
yeah, for sure. And
sorry, I mean to interrupt, but
no.
Yeah, we can. Yeah, it's not.
I mean,
it's
people.
It's not. This is the one time the Old Testament, if you will, has nullified. I mean, the fact that they had to have the Hebrew scriptures in the canon, if you will, already. I mean, I think it's the one time we could say that paganism was nullified. Is what pagan. I mean, that's what Christianity pretty much does. It nullifies paganism. And yes, I know that we have corrupted the text as Christians to bring in pagan notions and pagan ideas. But in the end result after 1,000 years, 1,500 now, whatever, has been a nullification when you look at it. We've nullified pagan. I mean, look at the tree. They're plastic. Atheists have them. Everybody's got a friggin' tree in this country. Every restaurant. I mean, whoopee-doo. Are you seriously calling them, there's trees everywhere. We nullified the whole idea.
Like, maybe so I'm a non-believer, and people bring that up. Like, my family is still evangelical, right? And I love this stuff. Like, I can't get enough of it, right? Like, my grandfather was huge into Christmas, and so even though I don't believe, like, I had 2 trees this year, and my mom came over, and it was always funny. As a kid, she would even though we were evangelicals before I left, she would decorate her tree, and she would have little Santa Clauses underneath, and she would pile manger scenes under there, and it would just be a whole bunch of mixed things. So one year, we were picking on her a bit about it, and we said, "Mom, we were kids, man. You never told us about Santa Claus. You said he was, false, but now you put, oh, I like him because I love knickknacks." So I'm putting all this stuff under the tree because it looks cute. So I guess part of it is a nullification, but it's still in the background. And part of it is, this whole assimilation thing, where all these things come in together, and it's a mix and match and plug and play kind of thing. Other symbols take over meanings, and different meanings are attributed to symbols that used to mean something else. But all the symbols are still there. All the symbols are still there. They just take on other meanings in other ways. Even, so if I were to go and read, ancient Near Eastern texts relating to the Old Testament in the ancient Near East, I have seen, that I could say the same thing, just like I say about Christianity, about Judaism itself. So I tend not to talk too much about it, but I do, and it's fine, to me, because I don't have this huge invested thing to where I need it to be this purified kind of idea, like evangelicals would to the Christian side, and like Judaism would, and Muslims would.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't need to be an apologist for any group, which is amazing. Because I can take it all in, read the literature, beautiful literature. Like, I love the Lord's libraries. I love his songs. I love his clubs, but, I just have problems with himself. And, but it is,
So you're not pagan?
No.
I would gamble to say.
And I studied too much with the Jews, like in you guys,
right,
out of Judaism, to believe that the Christians are 100% right. And, so it's pretty amazing.
Pagan. I would gamble that God knows you're not pagan. So is the tree pagan? And I would say about 80%. I would say 80% of Christians in the West, I'd say Europe and even in the North American continent, have no clue where holly comes from, where mistletoe comes from, where the tree comes from. No clue.
So I have these symbols in my house, and
isn't that a good thing?
The Jehovah's Witness would tell me that section in Jeremiah or Isaiah where it complains about setting up the tree in your house. Like, you ask somebody, they'll bring it right out to you and let you know about it, on why they wouldn't celebrate. Right. Like, if I was 10 years ago, I would know that text, but I don't know it now, unfortunately, because I haven't studied it enough to remember what it is. But, it was almost like a whole chapter where it talks about bringing in a tree and setting it up. And
Jeremiah 38, I think.
Yeah. So I do know that, but the beauty of it and bringing that tree in only is a collection of memories from my past and fond memories of my family and community and traditions. So when I bring it in, I'm also bringing in all those feelings when I was a kid and family connectiveness of doing things together. And, it's not about the tree in general. It's more about, mom came over. I don't know how many more years mom might have to put bulbs on a tree, bulbs from that she put on her tree way back that she gifted to me in different times when we were had good times and bad and poor. And so all those things through symbols come back and influence us in huge ways that psychologically and physically and all these things that we connect with all these holidays and things. So I'm more than happy to, even the idea of a resurrection, Easter, and all that kind of stuff, while it has tons of, everything's loaded, we can relax that. And how does it apply to us and what we're doing with those symbols and the traditions we set,
Yeah.
I think that, like, from a Torah perspective, just even Torah and Talmud alone, right? They're like the source of oral law and the written law. There's not really too much that Christianity goes against. I mean, I don't even think, here, look, if you have a Christian that's trying to keep the commandments, both written and what Orthodox Jews call oral, I don't know what would necessarily conflict. I know that counter-missionaries always, when describing what Christianity is, they'll say things like the guy on the stick, or they worship a man and all this stuff, but this is not what Christians actually worship. Christians worship like an earthly manifestation of the God of Israel, right? And no one ever says like this, especially from the Jewish world.
Mm-hmm.
They have to use derogatory terms to make their point, because if expressed properly, it doesn't sound as bad. Here, look, Judaism has taken upon itself weirder stuff, more foreign stuff than Christianity has. In other words, pagan means anything not endorsed in the Torah, just like idolatry in Hebrew. Avodah zarah means anything foreign that doesn't appear in Torah, any foreign form of service or worship. So that will include with little red bracelets, hamsas, the tree, the Kabbalistic tree of life,
Doreen says it flat out. She goes, "Where do you think the Christians got it?"
Yeah. So
they got a lot of these goofy notions. They were goofy notions at the time that people 100 years later thought, "Oh, this is serious stuff. We have to latch onto this."
Right.
But it was
not shooting down.
Go ahead.
So I'm not shooting down like Orthodox Jews adding a bunch of weird stuff just because it seems like the Torah allows for that. I mean, the Torah doesn't really put too many restrictions on what you can and cannot do. I mean, it lays down a set of laws, the 613 commandments, like basic do's and don'ts on like theological issues of not having no gods before God. So this is why no Christian walks around calling himself an idolater. Right? I mean, unlike Mormons who acknowledge that they worship three gods, but Christians will tell you, every Christian will tell you, or the average Christian will tell you, that they believe in one God described in three forms, but it's still, it's still in some way the God of Israel. So from a Torah perspective, unless that you're a dramatic counter-missionary who tries to paint like, oh, well, you worship a man and you worship a dead man. It's like Christians don't worship a man. Now, they worship the God of Israel, and just like many Kabbalists say that the 10 Sefirot are emanations of the one God, as described as God the female, God the mother, God, like God having breasts, God having a penis, and all these things. There are things that I don't believe in, but I don't think that the Torah considers it idolatrous. I never called a Chabadnik an idolater, and or with the average Kabbalist, just because the rabbis in the Talmud never condemned such behavior. It shows that the rabbis in the Talmud also believe that God had a body, like not a physical body, but they believe that he wore tefillin and he wore talit. So then, of course, the Rambam steps in 1,000 years later, around 600 years later, and then he tells us that that's more metaphorical. But it seems like the rabbis in the Talmud didn't think so, and Rashi didn't think so. And when the Torah explains that God brought us out of Egypt with a strong hand, or God is a man of war, it says there's ish milchama, that God is a man of war. So it seems that we shouldn't be condemning people for things the Torah fails to condemn them for first, right? So if the Torah doesn't necessarily condemn something, now if you're in a different religion, and I consider Islam a different religion because it claims that our scriptures are corrupted, that we corrupted like our own scriptures out of our pagan desire to like corrupt the pure monotheism that only Islam came to restore, right? That's for sure a different religion. That is Avodah Zarah, because the way we know what kind of God we worship is what that God expects from us, right? So if our God's telling us to keep the Sabbath and not eat shellfish, right? Well, these guys don't keep the Sabbath and they do eat shellfish, right? So it's clearly a different religion. But Christianity, built on a rabbinic notion of the Messiah, because the notion of the Messiah was developed by the rabbis, right? So all they did was ran with the scraps that fell from our table, I mean, to use Jesus' words, and try to make something positive out of their lives. I mean, something that we failed to do, because it was our job to educate the world. But you know what? They figured out some way to educate themselves just by mere scraps. And now, day and night, all we're going to do is make fun of them and ridicule them, and at the same time, not bother to educate them properly, right?
Yeah, Asher, if I can jump in real quick, I think that is in retaliation to what the belief systems have been doing to each other. It's a retaliation. So if I know that a missionary group is going to be proselytizing to my followers, you can almost bet I'm going to say everything in the book. Christians did it to each other. How do you think the whole idea of Satan and the devil and this whole thing of children of the devil came about? It's religious groups, Christian branches, labeling each other unorthodox or the untrue beliefs, and fighting with one another, making up stories and myths about one another, demonizing one another, to where it gets written down as fact later in history. So yeah, I would say that the Jews and Judaism has every right, with all the damage that Christian has done, because Judaism never accepted them, and they've been retaliating ever since. That's how we got the New Testament scriptures, from Greco-Roman Jews. Judaism has always been very leery of who they allow in because of assimilation, the fear of assimilation. And it's happened. Christianity made it work.
That's actually not true, by the way. I mean, Jews used to proselytize. I mean,
because
even the New Testament speaks about
it might
Jews.
not be true, but in the literature, it is true.
Well, not in rabbinic literature. Like rabbinic literature views Gentiles in a positive light. You know, Jews used to proselytize, and they only stopped proselytizing because Hadrian put a decree that any Jew caught proselytizing or any Gentile converting to Judaism would be put to death. In other words, Jews used to resemble Christians of today, and even the New Testament speaks about them traveling land and sea to make a single proselyte. It's only post the 12th century that the birth of Kabbalah arose, and they started separating the world between Jew and Gentile instead of between decent people and indecent people.
Yeah, see, I don't really see it that way. The only like an example for what you say, maybe an early, the only probably close to it would be James the Just in the book of James. The rest were very hostile to Judaism because Paul was hostile to Judaism, being all things to all people. When he preached that, and in Acts, they forced him to come back and take the Nazirite vow in the temple to prove that he wasn't preaching, Christianity or the law at the same time. And they took him out and gave him a beating to every inch of his life. That is appearing outwardly to be one thing, but in your heart, another. And he deserved that beating. And Christianity has been like that ever since. So when its founders are like that, then, of course, when the New Testament is made up of, I don't know what percentage it is now, but I used to know of the writings of influenced by Paul and people like him, the Johnnian community, yeah, it's going to follow. If more people were to write it like James, the Just, who came out and said, hey, I'm the head of the Church of Jerusalem. These are the 5 things that people need to follow if they're going to convert. Cut out the bacon chapter that Peter had, his vision that allowed people to eat unclean food. I can't believe I'm defending Judaism to a Jew. What's the matter with you, Asher?
Like Christianity is really nothing but a ancient form of Gnostic Judaism. And in the time of Jesus, and even in the time of Paul, where there weren't Nazarenes and Jews, there were probably around 30 different sects of Jews, and Christianity was one of them. And the Sadducees hated the Pharisees probably as much as they hated Nazarenes, or they hated the Essenes, or whoever possibly was the Qumran cult. In other words, it wasn't Christians and the rest of the Jewish world. I think that Jesus was right that when he was attacking with the rabbis of the time for being hypocrites, like for not, I mean, they were exiled. In other words, like being that the Jews were exiled on their watch, it shows that they were missing the mark, right? And I think that
they were doing it all for self-preservation, so they would not be assimilated into other cultures, so they could still have their identity. After what happened with them to the Greeks, also the Romans. That's why Romans was all inclusive. Come on in, everybody.
Yeah.
Be Roman, assimilate all these belief systems, assimilate all these cultures, all these symbols from all over the world that we have collected together. The Jews said, we're having none of it. The worst thing ever is that we have to give a prayer for the emperor in our temple, in our service. You know, they hated doing that. That's why a lot of these sects were against one another, because some were Roman sympathizers.
I think you're confusing times, like with the Maccabees, i.e. the time of the Syrian Greeks, and Roman times. Don't forget, it was the Jews who welcomed the Romans in.
Well, to get rid of the Greeks. I mean, it was...
No. Well, the Maccabees got rid of the Syrian Greeks. It was Aristobulus and his brother who were fighting for the throne, who brought in Rome to decide who should actually rule, and Rome put the weaker brother in and wielded power till they finally took over. In other words, the Jews are their biggest enemy. I mean, to say that the reason they were so sheltered was because they were trying to preserve their culture, the Talmud gives a completely different rendition of it. It says that the Jews had their temple destroyed because of baseless hatred amongst themselves. They had no identity of themselves.
When was the Talmud put together? The Talmud was put together much later, when they could reflect on something different that happened to them.
The Babylonian Talmud came first, and then
well, the Mishnah, I mean, in particular, from the year 300, it's giving a story of something that happened before. It's speaking in retrospect, right? You know, which gives us a bigger or a better picture.
Influenced by the Rebbe's and their views in retrospect of what happened on their history and culture. The winners always rewrite history in the way that they see it.
Oh, wow. I mean, I guess we'll never know, like, if they're being honest. But being that the Mishnah is written by more than just one person and the opinions of more than one individual or groups of individual, I think makes it more trustworthy than if someone at that time, for example, Josephus, half of what Josephus writes, we can't really believe because it's so exaggerated or so one-sided.
But he wrote in code. And he was very sympathetic in a lot of areas to Jews where the Romans would not get what he was doing. So he was like, hey, I know I'm working for the Romans here, but I'm still sympathizing here. And I'm going to, in an underhanded way, write this whole history the best way that I can so that Romans still accept it, but with a wink to Judaism to say, hey, you know, I'm with you guys.
I never read it or heard a scholar explain it like that. I mean, he was considered a traitor by the Jews. I mean, don't forget, he was trying to get the Jews to surrender after he surrendered. I mean, his whole platoon basically committed suicide, and he turned himself into the Romans, and he was trying to tell the Jews to do the same. I don't think he was considered as a Jewish sympathizer.
Yeah, he was doing that to preserve the temple, which he wasn't able to do anyways under Titus. So, you know, I could see people giving up to self-preserve, you know.
Okay. There's silence. There's dead air. Seems like dead air. Am I missing something?
No.
Yeah. Why am I defending Judaism here? This isn't right. I'm a non-believer defending Judaism.
I wanted to shift the conversation. I wanted to shift the conversation to we've been very merciful. I know we're going this backwards, and we should go the other way. But I want to know why the Jews would not convert under pain of death and torture, public humiliation, and the things about Christianity that a Jew avoids because he's Jewish, because God commands. We're merciful. We've been very good with the Christians, and as far as Christian people go in the West, particularly in Americas, for where I live, I can vouch. I can say that good people, good people, good people. With that said, there are things about the religion. I want to bring up something that was in the news a couple of years ago, especially in the Catholic news. We had a fella up in Kansas who had an accident in pole vaulting, and had brain damage, was in the hospital, was in really, really, really bad shape. And the churches, the churches in the area began to say, well, began to pray to this particular dead priest who was big amongst the community. And more people were praying to this priest on behalf of this kid, a good kid, by the way, I know him, that he be elevated, that he be, made into a saint. And they're trying to, and they're actually beginning, and the conversation became, and I'm trying to be good here with my words, that this dead priest was responsible for this kid's healing. Now, this is common, and this is one little community in mid-America. This kind of shit's got to go. I don't care how Jews have done in the past. That's one reason why I could go on about the idol shit. I could go on smashing idols. I'm trying to avoid that. Here's one thing I could present to you that where the creed of Christianity, the religion of Christianity, pollutes the flow between God and man. And the reason why a Jew can't follow this religion, would not follow it. They could have easily just bowed and said, okay, we'll join, and brought mayonnaise and bread.
They have.
But there's a lot that didn't. And it's got to be, there's got to be something to it. Why would they reject this religion? I think that there's good reason to reject it in many reasons. I mean, wouldn't you think? I mean,
partially.
Okay.
The reason there was an Inquisition, here, first of all, I think in the 700 years of the Inquisition, with a toll that was around 1,300 people killed. And these numbers are typically blown completely out of proportion. People think that Jews were being killed by the hundreds of thousands. But the main reason we had the Inquisition is because when Jews were kicked out of Spain, they weren't given the option of convert or die. That almost never was the case. But they were given the option of convert or leave. And about the vast majority of Jews, because they didn't really take their Judaism seriously, actually converted to Christianity outwardly. And inside their house, they would light candles. They'd keep some sort of tradition. But the more pious ones left. They left for Portugal. They left for the Middle East. And we see that every time there's an exile and the Jews return from exile, around 90% of the Jews always remain in exile. In other words, for this whole thing that Jews have kept their faith for so long, there's always been a remnant. But even today, 54% of born Jews are atheist, higher than any other ethnic group. So I don't. This is why I've never been a fan of this Lawrence Kellerman argument that we could prove that the Torah is true because, the Jews have kept it for so long and they passed it down through generations. I would say that the vast majority of Jews walking around today are descendants from converts, or from one family or two families. Not that they had some unbroken line, of many generations and many families. No, I mean, every year we lose more Jews than we gain. I think in America, there's probably less than 1,000 conversions to Judaism in general, Reform, Conservative, and Orthodox.
Yeah,
and
but
Orthodox is probably less than 200.
I think that's overall, though, because evangelicalism is losing big time, too. So I wonder, about that, if it's religion overall that is losing. And those numbers are just being reflected in the different groups, in different kinds of stats, when it's a decline in belief throughout, you know what I mean, as a whole.
Well, I would say there's more converts to Judaism today than there has been in the last 500 years. While in terms of Christianity declining, it's still the largest religion in the world. I mean, you're talking about over 1 billion followers, while Judaism only has 14 million Jews, of which maybe 8% are religious. So it's, I don't even think it compares.
Yeah, but on that side, there's plenty of people who profess Christianity but may not say, okay, we're not religious. You know what I mean?
Let me. I want to make one thing clear. If we were to be as proactive on something other than a simple counter missionary level, which is just friggin' fine. I don't care what anybody says. I love Rabbi Skillback and I love Tobias Singer. All right. I love that about, and I'm kind of that way myself in many ways. However, if we were to give them something more, I mean, it's like King Henry VIII. He when he broke away from the Pope and said screw Rome, and he went into all the churches and had them half knock down every single engraven image, every saint, every little demon, every little cherubim, everything, and left them stumps throughout the whole thing. He completely nullified all of that stuff, and it worked. I think the point I want to make here is, if we were to go to the Christian people now, and if we had to get down to the nitty gritty, and we had to have a base ready answer to say, this is what you're going to have to get rid of if you want a better relationship with your Creator than you do now. If you want to take on, the Torah, and you want to take on the 7, mitzvot, if you want to embrace your Creator, I don't mean this because I don't like the brand, the Jewish way, but okay, I'll just be straight. The ethical monotheistic way, the Jewish way. What do we need to? What do the Christians have to lose? Because they're going to have to lose something. They're going to have to leave something behind. And we could obviously go to the ceremonial stuff. Stop bowing to your statues. Second commandment, dude. That should be obvious.
I think no matter how pious,
beyond that,
how pious the intentions are, like how pious intentions are for any reason, usually the ways to go about bringing those things about end up causing more harm and more damage than if you let it continue. People for pious reasons, they were called iconoclasts, and it went underground. It didn't solve anything. It just went underground. We have them today, so. And then, he was seen as a tyrant. So I think the way to change it is to just teach the literature straight up as it should be. Teach Torah as it should be, and let people accept it for what it is, as a living, breathing document,
right,
that enables people to become better than what they are.
They're going to have to, one of the things
out
they're
of
going to
piety,
have to
go forward and create rules and force people. Those types of laws and things that you might implement may do far more damage than what the goal that you intend.
I see what you're saying. It would be, yes, of course, it's a free will.
It's like Christianity turning a blind eye to Hitler because they think he's doing Christians a favor because they killed Jesus, which is why it took so long for America to get into the war, because they're like, they're getting what they deserve. Who cares? We don't want to mess with their problems.
If we're at the mall and we're offering a sample, if somebody is interested and they come to us, there are things that in the Christian creed we have to leave behind. One, as I brought up, is praying to the dead. That is a Torah prohibition. If you're living in the land of Israel, Jew or non-Jew, whatever, and you're praying to the dead, that's bad. You could go before a court for that. That's how bad it is. So that's one aspect of Christianity you have to leave behind if you live a moral life. I was going to point out, that's what I was asking is does anybody else here, because I got a list of them, but can anybody offer something that we could say to the Christian, this is what we have, and I'll get the reason why we don't pray to the dead, because there is one God, and we could even say the living God. Why? Because God is here now with us. He's always with you. He breathes breath of life in man. He's always here now. So we can't say, I like the term, I've scolded for it before, but I do like the term the living God, because that is the now. That's the on the spot God. So we don't need the dead. The dead are dead. God is living. God is now. So we orthodox ourselves, I guess, to remember not to pray to the dead. So that was an offering, and I think that we might have other ideas as to notions that do clash with the scripture that have been developed under the umbrella or the label of Christianity. We've been, we're being nice, and that's good. But I, let's. I would like to express things why we don't convert. I got the Christmas lights, the Christmas tree, and the menorah. So, go figure. But still, there are things that in our lives we don't have idols in the house here. My wife's nice enough not to have idols. So what would y'all think would be something that we would say, you can do this because of this? Anyway, go for it. Please, somebody take over. I'll keep talking until somebody interrupts me, and it will be very boring. Somebody speak. There's Carla. I'll shut up. Let the lady talk. Carla, what do you say? You haven't spoken all night. Actually, you haven't shut up all night. I haven't gotten a word in. What's your take on this? Aaron, speak. Go for it.
So I would say this. My number one thing with the Christian view versus the way that I look at things is the lack of empowerment to the individual. That Christianity teaches you that you don't have the power within yourself, that you have to rely on the dead man, or you have to rely on this person or that person, or there's something that's in between you and the ability to, to be perfectly the way you were created to be. And that doctrine, that teaching is the one big thing that I see every time I talk to a Christian, is they have this slave, beaten, trodden, they're worthless, I'm worthless kind of mentality, and I don't see how humanity can thrive with every individual thinking that they don't have the power to directly connect with God and affect the world in a way beyond what maybe we can see with our own eyes. So that would be my number one dispute that I have with any Christian that's out there. Anything that gets in between me and my ability to go as far as I can, with God. I don't need the prophet to do it. I don't need, the dead guy. I don't need anything. I need me, and I need God, and I need nothing else. And from there, I build upon all of the other things. And I think Christianity starts, I've heard it many, many times, they say, everything starts with, the birth and death of this one particular individual. And it's so focused outside of yourself, it never gives you the place to really look inside of you and figure out who you are and how you can deal with things. So that's my 2 cents.
That was awesome. That was awesome. Carla, did Carla get to speak? Because I had family come in and we started, we have family in from out of town. Did Carla get to talk at all?
No, but I'm good. I'm kind of doing something else, so I'm not really 100% paying attention to what's going on.
Oh. So you don't love us anymore? Is that it? I'm kidding. I'm kidding. What say you, Asher? What say you, Wade? I really wish I should I should have snatched her out while she was in here. That was a shame.
Well, only statement I would make is that when God brought out Egypt, before he destroyed every pagan god. Call it what you will, anything outside the belief in the one God of Israel. And he destroyed them, literally.
Right.
Okay. Now, I think people were taking it too personal. What I mean by that is, are they pagan? Are they idolatry? No. For one thing, they're not a part of the covenant. These are the facts. There's no working it. How can they be in idolatry when they don't know the God of Israel? How can they be in idolatry if they never had that opportunity? They're just in what they're in right now. They're in paganism. They're in whatever. But when they come to know God and then they accept God and then they fall away into idolatry or whatever, then they have done what is wrong and evil. But until that time comes, how can you say they're in idolatry when they never knew the God of Israel? So they're just like Egypt was. Egypt did what they did, and when God came to tell them to let his people go, he wouldn't do it, and then it was on. So that's my take.
Well, I hear you when of course but they care. If you want to talk idolaters, it was Israel. I say it's Israel. When God spoke to 3 million people, whether they were the Avraham or the born Jew, if you will, or born Israelite, whatever, at that point they became Israel, and they're the one who made the golden calf. So it's not like what would a person have to choose to do? Because I keep the Sheva Mitzvot because of course God commanded, but I'm not going to deny the fact that I chose to do that. And when I came into this, I had to learn. I had to choose to not have a Christmas tree for a while. I had to get that out of my system. I chose to avoid chicken. I chose to avoid shellfish. Now I have an allergy. I used to love shrimp. I can't eat shrimp. I stopped eating it. Now if I try, I get sick. There you go. You take on certain mitzvah. I mean, what was it about? Let's just say an aspect of the religion that you learned from, and that you've heard taught to you from others that the Christian would have to consider losing. Like I said, pray to the dead. What Egyptian thing would one have to choose to destroy? Whereas God did it for Israel in the coming parshas, as we're going to see. What does a person have to leave behind?
Well,
praying to the dead would be one. Saints.
Yeah, I mean, they would have to. I mean, just like there was a mixed multitude.
One example. Go ahead.
I'm sorry, you broke up a little bit through there, so I didn't get the total question.
One example you could give. One example from Christianity. You're a faithful man at one time, and just an example is all. I'll shut up now because you were talking. Go ahead, man.
What example that they would have to change? Is that what you're asking?
Or what is an aspect of Christianity one would have to take into consideration when coming into this, when coming into Torah, when coming into the nation of Israel? What would be one thing that they would have to consider?
To me, the main thing is that believing in God is not enough. It's serving God and living after His word, and being a servant to God, and being obedient. Belief in a God just because He is doesn't make you a part of Him. It's being obedient. Christianity and a lot of them are out there. Just all you got to do is believe in the idea of Him. the Torah, the God of Israel, is totally different. It doesn't matter if you believe in Him or not. If you believe in Him, then you should live Torah. And that's it.
Gotcha. Well, Asher, Rabbi, you're a Baptist minister. I don't know if you've been defrocked. I can't say were are. What would be an aspect that you would say the average Western American Christian would have to reconsider or consider when coming to Torah? Anything on that, or am I going the wrong direction, or what say you? Go for it.
He disappeared.
Are you there, Rabbi? Okay, he might have gotten frozen out.
Well, while you're waiting on him, I'll throw in another caveat that I think would be very important for the Christian coming.
Alfred's next. Go for it, my friend.
If the Christian is going to have to learn to get rid of their literalist view that everything is exactly as what is written, the word of God is infallible kind of idea of how do you say that that the text that we have today is preserved by the hand of God in the exact formation as it has always been, I think is something that I haven't learned through Judaism to find. There's so many different opinions. It could be literal. It might be literal. It's probably literal. It's not at all literal. And all of those statements are absolutely true. And it's a stretch for the Christian, especially any Christian scholar that has, they have studied their life away to figure out, the exact nature and to prove the exactness of those words. And I think that it's a stumbling place for a lot of Christians because they cannot get past it has to be black and white kind of thing.
Let me put this to you. What is the Peshat in comparison? Because isn't that exactly what the Peshat is? The base literal meaning of the written Torah contextually, isn't that what the Peshat is to us? That's where I don't know where biblical. I don't understand biblical literism as much, and Gav tried to explain it. I'm still kind of goofy, so
I think the Peshat can change a little bit because Peshat, right? Like 4,000 Israelites were swallowed up, by the earth, right? So that's Peshat. So we could say, God opened up the earth and swallowed them, or we could also say that God led them to a place where there was a seismic activity, and just at that precise moment, the earth opened up, and it was a natural cause. So both of those are shot because, yes, the earth happened, but how did the story get related doesn't necessarily mean that, God moved in this miraculous way, especially when you're dealing with English, because, take one more example. The whole earth was flooded. Science will tell you that the whole earth was not flooded. But English says, the whole earth, and Hebrew says, aretz, and then that could open up a bunch of different opinions. So does the Peshat stay the same? Was there a massive flood that created a lot of damage and so on and so forth? Yes. But does it mean it was global, or does it mean it was regional? It doesn't really change the Peshat unless you're saying it's literally, especially the King Jamesists will tell you it's literally the way King James has it translated.
There you go. Talk with my mic off again. Wayman, you were going to say something.
Yeah, I think they would have to suspend their unbelief or disbelief. When you go to the movie theater and you're watching a movie, the director and the creators of the movie want you to believe that everything within the context of that movie, while you're watching it, from the time it starts to the time it's done, is believable. If it's not believable, they will do certain things within that setting to persuade you to suspend your belief and your non-belief, to suspend it just for an hour. Just give me an hour and then enjoy this movie. Then you can go back to reality and think about it that way. That's how I believe Christians could come to Judaism. Judaism could go to Christianity. People can think about things in different ways. And I do that sometimes too. I'm very sympathetic from hanging out with you guys to Judaism. So for whatever reason, when I come in with you guys, I kind of show respect more and I don't harp on it more because I suspend my unbelief for this session so I can have meaningful conversations where I can learn about the Jewish literature and the text and Torah and what that might be and the symbols in that and how it influenced people. Then I can suspend that when I hang out with early Christianity and learn about Christian scholars from both the non-believer and the believers part of it. And then maybe, oh man, I want to read the Nag Hammadi library, or I want to read the Epic of Gilgamesh and stuff like that, and wonder what those burnt libraries of cuneiform had, on Rosh Hashanah and things like that. So
you don't have to be nice.
In order to suspend it, they would need to suspend their unbelief, see Torah as a living document, and also see it not as something old, like Old Testament. Like, I don't even like using it. I'm a non-believer, and it bugs me to no end that they would say Old Testament, New Testament. There's nothing old or new about it, anything. They're both still very much live documents, simply because people believe in them that much and they influence the lives of people and communities that they touch in different ways. So the Christian will definitely have to suspend his unbelief coming into Judaism, in that following the 613 is a positive thing and can lead to righteousness rather than just saying a prayer. That didn't make sense at all, but hopefully.
Yeah.
I thought that was good. I like that.
So when I come in here, I'm going to a movie. I can believe some parts and find it meaningful and be like, man, you know how like sometimes you cry during a movie? Sometimes you're very moved to action during a movie. They can influence different ways on how different things. The writers of the script, it might not be 100% historical true. Even with documentary movies, people might protest about it and say, oh, that's not really how it happened. And the director said, well, I took liberties in doing this so I could make a better art form. And you're like, oh, okay, I could go with that, but I really know the truth. So to the writers for these documents, that we pass on. That's how I see it. I mean, you don't have to because you're part of the movie, I guess. I don't know.
Well, on some level, you have to. At least I think this is one of the things that Judaism has done for me. Is like I have this level where, I'm part of the movie, so I believe it. I have to be in that position, but I also have to remember that I have these other parts of me and be aware of those as well. So I can sit over here with this rabbi that's telling me about how, Joseph was this, but the time is wrong, and he's going through all the scientific explanation, and at the same time be listening to him and believing his conviction. Also know that there's other people with their own convictions and realize that it's all of these different convictions that make up the one greater unit of God. and that helps me. Has helped me. And before I came into Torah learning, I would have never said anything like what just came out of my mouth. But it's transformed the way that I see the universe around me into a beautiful spectrum that just was not there before I came into Torah.
I think the afterlife is something that you have to get rid of. While there is discussion, opinion of an afterlife in Judaism, it doesn't matter. One iota. Technically, there is no heaven or hell. In the Torah, it's heaven and earth. It's now. It's living.
Yeah, I think the afterlife was created because they didn't see, from their view, a fair amount of justice happening in their lives while they were still alive. There was so much injustice happening, and they say, well, maybe if not in this life, surely in the life to come, these people will pay for what they're getting away with here. So I kind of think maybe that's how that started, that idea of the afterlife happening, where, the just people who were, and the righteous who were slain, for justice and the kinds of things that they believed was just, and they never, were rewarded in this life for it, surely in the next they will be. Or evil that was never punished in this life, surely in the next it will be. That's that kind of thinking, I think, brought about, this huge construction of the afterworld, what it would be like, and all of that.
If it's not just heaven, it's hell too. Now,
definitely.
No eternal damnation. That is a horrible thing to teach your children.
Yeah,
it's just controlling the masses, man. That's all that is. Control the masses. Do it this way, and you'll go to heaven. If you do it that way, or you piss me off, you're gonna go to hell.
Yeah. So who do we put in hell? All the people who disagree with us.
Well, it keeps the masses small and afraid, doesn't it? I mean, it keeps them, in their place. They're born shameful, and we're going to shame you for your existence. And we're going to tell you all the horrible things are going to happen to you completely out of your control after you're dead. What a way to make a person feel absolutely pathetic. Of course, it's population control. Of course, it's mind control. Got to keep the peasants in line. As soon as those peasants learned how to read, they reformed the church, and people even broke away from that. I mean, what a horrible thing. Like I say, when you walk into a church, a Catholic church, God bless the Catholics. I love them. I really do. But you walk into that church and there's a dead guy on a stick. You're like, a year old. People, and you say, well, we don't, I know Asher says, I know deep inside the mature person's heart, who's smart enough to know and read, that's obviously not God. But to the 2-year-old, to the 3-year-old, to the 4-year-old, that's the God everybody's bowing to, man.
Man, what are you talking about? When I was an adult, someone say something about hell, I'd be like, oh, shit. Yeah, it's scary, man. I mean, it really is. When I said something to my daughter about leaving the church, man, first thing she looked at me and says, I don't want you to go to hell, Daddy. And I said, well, honey, it makes 2 of us. But,
Right?
Yeah. But yeah, my father I think he enjoys it a little bit. He tells me I'm going to go to hell every once in a while. So
yeah, I've been in outer darkness for about 11 years now. So.
Oh, cool. What part are you at?
I don't know. I'm in darkness. I can't see.
Oh man! Oh, you're in that dark. Oh, okay. All right. Well, I ain't going down there. That's a bad shit down there.
It's the Mormon version of hell. It's the outer darkness. You're not punished, but you're blind, and I've been there. Is that Farhan? Baruch Hashem. Hey, Salam, shalom. Welcome back, dude. It has been, what, 5 years since you last... Is this the same Farhan who came in here 5 years ago? You talking? Do you have a mic? No, not the same Farhan. Welcome. Yep, that's him. I'll be darned.
Yeah, it's been a long time. I think I remember.
Well, that's something else. We'll give him a second. He's going to get in here.
Yeah, the good thing is for all those that tell you to go to hell, you can just tell them that you've already been there, because whatever it is that doesn't exist, you've already been to that place.
Nice. Yeah, the original sin topped off with eternal damnation. Now this also leads. I'm gonna, and this is going to go on the sympathetic view again on when you have a reincarnation notion, and it's not obviously it's nowhere in Torah, but there is implications, and it's been an opinion that's been tossed around. Again, you're putting, whereas I think that the eternal damnation and original sin dichotomy limit human capacity for growth. I also think the entire notion, going back to what I said earlier, of an afterlife, or even in a recycling or a reincarnation notion, takes away from dealing with evil and goodness here on earth now. In other words, I think we would be better off getting rid of the that when you come to the Torah, you have to get rid of all notions of afterlife and being born in sin. There's no such thing as a sinful baby. You can't punish a child. You can't punish someone who can't even control their bowels. Are you kidding me? You're not a demon spawn. You're not damned from the get-go. Why do you think God gave you Torah? Because you deserve it, because you can do good with it. It's a merciful act. It's a salvation issue. You're right?
Isn't part of what the problem with afterlife is thinking about like a different world, a different place, and not like what happens after we're dead? Like, if we pollute the earth, what happens to the 14 generations after that have to clean it up, as opposed to just saying, well, it doesn't matter if we pollute the earth because the earth will be created anew. We're going somewhere else, as opposed to saying we're going to be reconstituted over and over and over. Energy doesn't go away. It just gets redispersed over and over again on the same planet. So do we want life to continue on? Then we maybe need to do something today so that life can continue on tomorrow, instead of hoping that some miraculous thing is going to whisk us off to Never Never Land, and us and Captain Hook can play fairy tales all day.
Welcome, Alvin.
What's going on? We talking afterlife?
Well, we were doing it was originally, and we've got just a few minutes left on the live portion. We're going to invite Christian friends in. I invite a lot of mine. John invited. We're hoping to get some Christians to, ask questions. It's a Merry Christmas show. It's once a year we do this. It's not always Christmas, but so we're not exactly. We've been very merciful, and we've been very, very, why the Christian and really are our brethren for Torah folks. But at the same time, there are reasons why we don't convert, and I'm kind of weird. So we're kind of getting to that point now as to where we say, okay, what divides the mitzvot, the Torah, from the Christian religion? What would if I were to? Okay, I'll ask you this. We'll close on this. I want to throw you into it. You just got here. I'm picking on you. All right, here we go. Okay. So if a Christian were to come and say to someone in Judaism, Ger, Jew, Noahide, whatever, and were to say, I'm interested what would, if there were one thing that the Christian would have to reconsider, the average Western Christian have to reconsider about their creeds and religion, what would they have to give up? Now, I won't say give up necessarily, but what would they have to consider or reconsider when coming to Torah? What would be one thing maybe that you have experienced in your personal life? What say you on that issue?
I mean, the ultimate, not the elephant in the room, but the Empire State Building in the room is Yeshua the Messiah. That is the key. That is the overwhelmingly big distinction between the two. You know, other than that component, there's not too much difference between. I mean, obviously, you know, they're not following the feast days. They're not keeping kosher and all those kind of things. But the most gigantic difference is the divinity of Yeshua. I would say that's the biggest difference between the two.
Yeah, that was the Empire State Building we hadn't even covered in 2 hours. We've avoided that one topic. I don't know how we haven't gotten there yet. Amazing.
Yeah, you know, that was pretty easy.
That's the overwhelmingly biggest thing. But I will say this though, the view of the afterlife in general has changed drastically. I mean, even within Christianity, what first and second century Christians thought about the afterlife is completely different from what modern day Christians think about the afterlife. You know, you see this imagery of a red man with a pitchfork and horns sitting on a throne in a fiery place and demons prancing all around. There's no, you know what I'm saying? There's no scriptural support for that kind of scenario. You know,
no, there is not.
Yeah, Satan is the god of earth. He roams earth. He to and fro on the earth. There's nowhere in the Old or New Testament where Satan is like the king of hell and he's sitting on a throne and he's, you know.
Yeah.
You know,
took a third of the angels with him. And a third of the angels did nothing. Are you kidding me? God would have.
Yeah,
really.
Matter of fact, according to Josephus, it's angels that are stationed in Hades, distributing punishments temporary punishments, I might add, to particular individuals that may have been not so nice. That's at least what Josephus said. That's very different from, you know, grotesque looking creatures. And here's what's interesting. There's no physical description of evil spirits in the Bible.
Yeah.
You know, or demons or whatever you want to call it. You know, in the Old Testament, they don't, you know, that daemon or whatever, that's Greek. In the Old Testament, you don't really see that word. Because they just have evil spirits.
Oh.
Yeah, so yeah, I think a lot of the imagery and the perception of what, you know, at least the punishment afterlife situation is drastically different from first century Christians even.
It is. We're coming up on 9 o'clock on in the Central Time, 10 o'clock Eastern. We're going to end the live broadcast right now and head on into the afterglow. We do this every Thursday night. Now, John's in Portugal. John Gishal is in Portugal. I'm going to be taking over the Thursday night. It's going to be on this channel because it's going to be a lot easier for me to do it from my own and not two at the same time. So we're going to do it on this channel. But go to Facebook, join the Orphans of Avraham, go to Google Plus while it lasts, join the Orphans of Avraham, and at least get connected with. Google Plus is going away, Facebook isn't. So if you want a link every week to this little conversation we do, that's where you go. Of course, we're going to put this up on John's channel as well as mine. So John Gishela YouTube channel will have every Orphans of Avraham that he's done, all the backlog, and from here on out, you'll see them also, as you can now see them, on the Idol Smasher YouTube channel. So subscribe to them, comment, rate, email us. What do you want to talk about? What do you want to hear from us? We want to hear from you. And James the Idol Smasher at gmail.com. Of course, join the groups. You have a link every week. Thank you, everybody, for stopping by. Wade, Alvin, and Aaron. Shabbat shalom, y'all.
Shabbat shalom.